This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Jackie O and you're listening to Militantly Mixed.
Yo, this is Rashani from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
Hey cousins, it's your Sir Auntie Sharmane Fury. I just want to apologize real fast for the delay in this episode. It was supposed to air on Tuesday, January 10th, and I did actually have this episode edited. I just didn't have it laid down yet. I thought I was going to have time to do it on Monday because it really should have only taken about 15 minutes or so, but I was in meeting after meeting all day Monday, and then I ended up getting my COVID booster, my third booster, my fifth shot. And within just a couple hours, it had laid me out. I ran a few errands afterwards, and then by the time I got home, I was done. My husband too. It was a pretty potent vaccine. I've recovered from it a little bit faster than my husband. It only took me until like late last night, which was Tuesday. He's still suffering though, so it's a small price to pay to try to protect us and others from the spread of COVID, but it rocked me, so I didn't get my work done. I do apologize about that. But what I was noticing yesterday was there's all this news, all these tweets, all these social media posts about Harry and airing his family dirty laundry and things like that. And I was wondering what was going on. I thought it was just an extension of the documentary from December, and then I realized when I looked at my Audible app that his book Spare had loaded because I had it on pre-order. I started listening to that a little bit. I'm not very far. I'm only partway into part one. And then last night I noticed he had an interview with Michael Strahan on Hulu, so I ended up watching that too. And I will say that from what I've heard so far in the book and what I saw in the Strahan interview, the opinions that I'm expressing in this upcoming episode that you're about to hear, I don't think they're changing. I still feel very much in support of the decisions behind Harry and Meghan leaving the royal family for the protection of Archie, Lilibet, and Meghan. You'll hear me talk about the monarchy because I was raised in a household that included a British grandmother that was a monarchist. The Queen and the royal family has been a big presence in my upbringing, even as an American, and so I have very strong feelings about whether or not I think the monarchy should still exist, and yet still hold a fascination for me. It's a conflict that I have because of my upbringing. But I don't feel like my opinions that you're going to hear expressed in this episode will change at all based off of whatever Harry ends up revealing in his book. I think I don't really have any feelings that say he shouldn't tell his family stories or air dirty laundry in this case. Because as you'll hear me describe in this episode, the family and the institution are linked but separate, and it's the institution that allows this family to treat their family members the way that they do. The institution of the monarchy versus these are just family members, because they're really not just family members because of the institution. It's a lot more complicated of a situation than anything any of us who are either recording this show or listening to the show would ever have to face. So I just wanted to put that little thing in there that the new news hasn't really affected my opinion in any way, shape, or form. I haven't had a chance to connect with Auntie Teresa, although I know that she's probably not actively seeking out news about them in the way that it kind of hits my ears, sort of just in the algorithm. I'm a partial Brit. I was raised by a monarchist, so the royal family is in some way, shape, or form. There's always something that I see or hear or read or whatever that is connected to them. All right, without further ado, please enjoy this discussion between Teresa Stovall and myself for the Mixed Auntie Confidential episode number 9, Meghan and Harry. Hey y'all, welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your Sir Auntie, Sharmane Fury, aka the Blazing Bird, and joining me is
Mixed Auntie Teresa.
Mixed
Hey,
Auntie
hey, hey.
Teresa.
Happy New Year.
And we are back for our first episode of Mixed Auntie Confidential, episode number 9 in the new year. And we're going to be talking about racist royals. Royally racist thing. I feel like I've lost my flow altogether, just like jumping back into podcasting after taking a couple weeks off. I don't know.
You could never lose your flow, Sharmane.
I'm hella goofy now. I have been podcasting. I have been doing my other shows, even though I was supposed to be on a break. But getting myself into a headspace to start talking about racist royals. Well, how was your Happy New Year? Or how was your Happy New Year? How was your holiday season? I'm not here.
The holidays are great. I'm in Atlanta. And of course we had some unusually cold temps and
some crazy weather,
causing lots of utility issues for folks. I'm blessed. I had a couple days without water, but kept heat, kept power, no frozen pipes, no floods. So I'm giving thanks to everything and everybody, and hoping that all of us sail into the new year with ease and joy and wellness, and just, as smoothly as we can. And I hope the year goes great for everybody. Just putting it out there now. And I have my collard greens and my black-eyed peas. So, that's the ritual, right?
I saw a TikTok the other day, and it was like the most relatable TikTok I've seen, where a girl was like, how am I supposed to eat 12 grapes in 60 seconds before the new year? Because that's what the Spaniards do. Eat all the black-eyed peas and collard greens. And then she started mentioning like different Asian things too. She looked just black, so I have no idea what her thing is, but she clearly had all the cultural references, and she was hitting so many of mine too that I was like, yeah, that's what New Year's is like for me every year. I have a Spanish uncle. We used to shove the grapes. We had our sukiyaki and soba for Japanese part of the New Year. We had a black-eyed peas, collard green. Like, you just sitting there going through everybody's thing, trying to get this thing done before midnight, so that you can go into the new year good.
I'm jealous y'all got all that. Shoot,
it's a lot to try. Like the most hectic New Year's was when I had a representative from like all my cultures plus my married-in uncle from Spain. And that's like, that was the year, because his father was from Louisiana, so his mother was from Spain, his father was Creole, and so we had to do black-eyed peas, collard greens, and all the other things, and we had to do the 12 grapes, and then because my aunt is Japanese, we also had to do the sukiyaki and soba, and it was just like, let's get everybody's stuff in your face in time. It was fun.
I love that.
But to see someone do that in a TikTok, I was like, yes, that's how stressful New Year's is.
We're delicious.
It's delicious. It's just stressful especially because like with the soba, you just have to be eating it into the new year. Like it's just like it's your New Year's Eve. You're actually
supposed to be eating the greens. Yeah. I know.
And like the black-eyed peas and stuff, I think that's kind of like a first day type of thing too, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so, but we're trying to get it all done because we don't know that we're going to spend the next day together. So you're just, but then you actually, for Spaniards, you actually have to get 12 grapes eaten, chewed, and swallowed in the countdown in the 10 seconds.
In the 10 seconds?
I think it's in the 10 seconds.
Okay, so I do have to drop in a quick correction here. It is not the last 10 seconds. My memory was foggy about it because it's been like 20 years since I actually did it with my family. It's not the 10 seconds before. It's not the countdown that we're doing, 10, 9, 8. It's a grape for every strike of the clock at midnight. So if each strike hits it takes about 3 seconds. So it's about 36 seconds, and you'll be eating and swallowing a grape each of the strikes until midnight, until it ends. So that is 12 grapes, 12 strikes of midnight, about 36 seconds. Just want to clarify that. And it actually has also been adopted by multiple Spanish-speaking countries where Spain colonized. Boom.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's in the 10 seconds because we were like 10, 9, 8, 7. Like we were like, I think it was. I'll have to look it up to be sure because it's been a long time since I've been with that side of the family. But
oh my God.
yeah, it was a
I
whole
love
ass
it,
thing.
though. But you got to admit, that's rich and precious and delicious. Although, like you said, the timing, and then they got somebody talked about, I can't remember what culture it was, not one. No, I think it's Irish, which technically I do have, thanks to my dad, but about how you open the front door and the back door and let all I was like, you know what? First of all, I'm in an apartment. I got one door.
I got one door.
I got patio doors, but it's different. And secondly, I said, again, like you, I said, I'm gonna keep it real streamlined this year. Maybe when we're on the other side of some of the challenges that this country and world are facing, I might be ready. But right now, I'm sticking with the tried
and true.
Yes, ma'am. But I admire and envy all the people who have the multiple things. I think that you just loading up the good.
What's lucky about being Japanese and Black is that some of the things align. So like in Japan, you have to have cleaned your whole house by New Year's Eve, because you can't be cleaning into the new year, because then you'll start your new year dirty, right? So in both cases, both sides of the family, we had this. So it didn't matter which side of the family I was with at the time. We had to get everything done and cleaned by December 31st before we started to do our New Year's Eve celebrations. And then New Year's Day, you're not supposed to do shit. You make sure you eat your stuff you're supposed to eat, but other than that, you're done. You're starting a new year in rest.
Yes.
So both of those being parallel are really helpful. It's just like making sure that like the New Year's Eve stuff got done correctly so that you could do the New Year's Day
so
stuff.
You can cruise into
yes, you can cruise into it. But when you have some of these things like the Spanish side is so loud and it's just like, we're doing this and the New Year's is big, and the Japanese side is just like, thank you, thanks for having another year, thank you, like this is just like quiet and stuff. It's just a lot.
I absolutely love it, and maybe one day Militantly Mixed could host. We could all gather somewhere.
Have a
militantly.
Can you imagine a whole room full of people trying to do their own like trying to share their tradition across all of us, and we're all like, everybody grapes, everybody full of black eyed peas.
Well, even if we did it on Zoom and each person just shared their own traditions and we were all that would be an amazing film.
That could be fun. Yeah.
That could be so much fun.
And just one more thing we can add to the list of things that been talking about possibly getting a chance to do over this next coming year.
Yes,
for sure.
But yes, I think the house cleaning is pretty much universal. I've already started I started mine at 6 a.m. this morning. Yes.
I don't think I'll be able to get my house clean because I am in the process of packing and
I think
move, but straightened. Straightened.
Whatever. I'm a firm believer, of course, in whatever you can reasonably get done is good. Because I don't know that I'll have everything pristinely.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I said, I started today, got the floors did, and all that, and then I'll be working my way through, but I'm not going to have 100% ideal.
Yeah.
Like the shredding will not have been taken to the shredding place. The donations probably won't have been made by December 31st.
Right.
Oh, well. I mean, but you don't mind me crazy. So, Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, everybody. So I hit you up over sort of close around the Christmas break to ask if you had seen. Well, I didn't even ask. I just started talking about it as if you had. You were like, "Oh, I hadn't seen it yet," because I had feelings about the Meghan and Harry documentary on Netflix. So I did watch the first 3 episodes like when they came out, and then I watched the last 3. Because by the time you said, "Oh, I'll watch it," those last 3 episodes hadn't dropped yet. So we both caught up on it. I feel like I should have rewatched it though, but there was definitely a lot of things for me as a Black Japanese British person who grew up with a British grandmother in my house who is a monarchist, and all the stuff that comes along with growing up with a monarchist. Like, there was a lot of things that were hitting me that way. And then also, I'm a Black kid from LA, and she was too. Like, there was a lot of stuff, there was a lot of parallels, a lot of feelings I had, and I wanted to see what you thought about things too. So where do you want to start in this conversation about these racist royals?
Well, I would like to start, Mane, is big picture, macro. And I want to defer to you and your Britishness. And your Britishness. And I
should have made a cup of tea.
And I just learned a new word and wrote it down, monarchist. So you have that experience. I am just a typical American when it comes to all this royal stuff, and left-wingy enough and Afrocentric enough and everything else that, I'm like, the what, the who, huh? Because I wasn't going to watch it until you
you weren't until I told you?
Yeah,
I feel like I forced 6 hours.
No. Oh, no. I'm super happy I watched it, and I'll give you all the reasons. But I really would like to start, I think it's best to start big picture with you helping me and our listeners, because you have a personal connection to this monarchy, this Britishness, this thing that most of us who are not from and or connected in any way to that culture would have any way of understanding except through our very specific lenses.
Yeah, the British royal family is really strange because, I mean, it is the most famous of all the royal families on the planet, I think, for people not in that country. Like, the rest of the world is very much aware of the British royal family. But understanding their role and what they are is very weird for especially Americans. And even though I am American born here and everything like that, I did grow up with a monarchist grandmother. So the British royal family they're just a figurehead now. They used to be the head of state. They used to control their country and all the countries that they have, colonized over the world. But over time in the last century, countries started declaring independence and separating, although in some cases the British government has to vote if they're allowed to be independent. It's a whole damn mess. It's so tangled because technically they're not the head of state in the UK. They're a figurehead, but they ask the Prime Minister to form a government in their honor, but they don't have a say in what politically happens in the United Kingdom. Although there are members of the Commonwealth, other countries in Africa, in the Caribbean, all over the world, where the Queen was the head of state, even though in her own country she wasn't. So it's a messy thing. But then there's also the difference between, yes, they are a royal family, they are blood relatives, but they are essentially employed by, although they don't get paychecks necessarily, but they're essentially employed by a system of, God, what do you even call the system? It's just the system. It's the governing body that tells the royals what to do and where to go so that they can represent Britishness around the world, especially
they're like spokesmodels.
Yeah, that's a good thing. They're like the car show models where they show up to the car shows and like, this is the new car. They're like that. But they're the most expensive welfare family on the planet. They make millions and millions of dollars a year. They live in all these palaces that are essentially not necessarily owned by them, but owned by the system. They still have to like get permission to live in different places. It's such a weird fucking thing to wrap your head around. But you're still supposed to behave like as a British citizen or whatever, you're still supposed to behave as if, even though they're not the head of state, they are your head of state. And so they're the most important thing. Like we don't have anything like that. We have celebrities and we have political dynasties like the Kennedys say, but we don't have anything to the level of, these are people who are not free. which is interesting, very much governed by the system that tells them what to do and where to go. They have to perform a certain role to the satisfaction of that system. But also they're monarchs. Like, it's bananas. It doesn't make any sense. And what they used to do in terms of being involved in government and stuff like that just hasn't existed in many, many years. And so now their job is to literally like open a bank, or like cut the ribbon at a hospital, or shake hands down a line of people just to say, hey, you get to see us on occasion. That's literally their job. And depending on what level of tier of the royal family you are, you got your main squad, the queen, which now is King Charles, but Queen Elizabeth, and then her husband is even a sub to her. Her children are ahead of her husband. Like, there's all these weird little hierarchies, and so like there's certain events that like the queen would do, and another member of the royal family could join the queen as like a gift. but you can't be more popular than the queen in the moment. So there's like rules that affect them that are governed by the system, but you can't control what's going to happen when you're there. So people in the royal family can get in trouble for shining too bright. Like, everything everything about this system is bananas, bonkers, stupid. And yet the idolization and the emotions that British citizens have, even if you're not necessarily a monarchist, like even if you'll see people who are essentially anti-monarchy, where they're just like, we need to get rid of this royal family system, put this money back into the country. People are starving right now. There's a lot of like living wage poverty that's happening right now in the UK. But they're still planning Charles's coronation. But whatever. You'll have those kind of anti-monarchists who will still be like, but the queen. Like, the way they will idolize her, even though technically they're against the idea of having a monarchy.
Oh, it's a brand.
It's a brand.
It's a brand.
But there's this weird level of idolatry that happens with Elizabeth that we obviously don't have any comparison to, because most of us weren't alive when King George was present, or right. Edward or George V, and all these ones that preceded them. Like, because she was the longest living monarch, we don't get to see what that transition was like for other monarchs until now. But there are people that just idolize her as this magnificent, magnanimous human who couldn't be less in touch with like the world as a whole. Who's like,
and some of these are people of color in these former colonies.
Yes,
or
the majority
colonies to the UK.
Yes, and the majority of the countries that are in the Commonwealth are Black and brown people, are mm-hmm. African and Caribbean people, or Pacific Islanders and such like that. Mm-hmm. And yet they have, up until recently, no representation of Black and brown people in the family.
They still don't.
They still don't. True.
We'll get to that.
But that's a big part of this story that is coming up, and they just couldn't be less in touch with what reality is like for the rest of the world. They think we're supposed to be grateful for them showing up and waving at us sometimes, and they don't understand when we get mad at them for different things. But as a mixed American kid who was raised with a British monarchist grandmother, like, we had to curtsy to a photo of the queen in my house and things like that when we entered a room, and like it was a really, like, if there was any
to a photo of Queen Elizabeth,
I liken it to like how every Black family had that one picture of Martin Luther King by the door.
But nobody was curtsying.
You didn't have to curtsy to it, but in the same way that we had the picture of Martin Luther King at the door, we had the picture of the queen at the door, and it would be like, you'd almost have to like treat it like a religious icon, where you'd walk into the house and curtsy to the queen. Also, my Nana was such a person that, like, the way she set herself up or positioned herself in the house, you would have to go to her to greet her, not curtsy necessarily, but you would be the one to initiate a hug or something like that. She just didn't do stuff like, you went to her. So she was very much kind of like performatively fancy. But what we didn't know, because she's our Nana and we don't know anything else, is that like my family was not elite British people who came to the United States. My family were British equivalent to white trash. And my Nana married a American, came here, and then changed her accent to sound more like the Queen's accent so that we could be fancier here than we would have been.
Well, how many? That's the immigrant story. I think it's also important, real quick, to interject that's how the U.S. was formed, with folks like your family who left the UK. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think a lot of, folks aren't really aware of that or forget it or aren't keeping it in mind. That's why I wanted us to start with the big picture, and the context that's how the U.S. started. You just described, you said, well, they were like the equivalent of white trash. That the equivalent of white trash is who founded the United States.
And then they reinvent themselves when they're here. And like,
so your ancestors were classic.
Classic white immigrants. My Nana's brother was the one who told me, like, because I would talk about, like, I remember as a kid the vague memory of him correcting her once when I was little, and asking her, why are you talking like that? And of course, as a child, you don't know what's going on. But as an adult, when I went to go visit my great uncle, I was close to him when I was younger. I went to visit him in Canada as an adult, and he ends up telling me something about her being such a fake. And I was like, well, I know what I think you mean when you say that, but like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, first of all, there's the accent. We don't speak the Queen, because it is a drastic difference between my uncle's accent and her accent. He was like, we're like, so to put it in like a American context, we're Southie in Boston, like the poor whites. It's equivalent of that in England. And she came here, reinvented herself, changed her accent to the Queen. So we got to have a little bit of fanciness because we were British.
But I mean, as an immigrant, if you're not, I'm side-eyeing you if you're not using that opportunity for reinvention. I'm like, well, why would you bother?
Stick it out, right?
Well, I'm just saying, in human nature being what it is, and I'm not saying everybody does it or needs to, but my gosh, if I have the opportunity and it makes sense to me, my goals are not in alignment with my current reality. I mean, and to me, and again, from a U.S. perspective, there's nothing more American you can possibly do.
Super American, yeah. I will say both of my grandmothers, my Japanese grandmother and my British grandmother, both came to the U.S. to be Americans.
Well, that's why you go to.
But she maintained this accent, this like,
Well, because this country, in general, I call it the Simon Cowell factor. That you'll know, we will all notice, whether it's in advertisements, popular culture, or whatever, you'll have a British person or a British voice. I can't do a good accent, so I don't want to insult anybody, but a British accent or a British voice, and automatically, right? Mm-hmm. It's the stamp of superiority, and it's white supremacy and everything else, but there's something deep in the DNA of us that we might sit up a little straight, or we give it a little more credibility.
We give it more credibility.
So I am not mad at your Nana, okay? I'm like, why? What else would you do?
I agree with you. It's just one of those things, like, once you start noticing the things that your family did, you're just like, I don't truly know what version of British we were, because the version of British I was raised with isn't a reflection of the culture that she was necessarily raised in. She was raised around, certainly, but not in. And so it ends up having this I know that there was years and years that, because of my training and because of my programming, I was really interested in the royal family, because even my Japanese grandmother really loves the royal family, which is hilarious because there is a Japanese royal family, but she could give a fuck about them. they're very similar to the British royal family in that they are figureheads. They're not lawmakers and things like that, but they still exist. They're still present.
She was vibing.
Yeah, but she likes the British one, and so we like all the stuff. Like if there was a wedding or a funeral, or even for the sub members of the family, we were still up in the middle of the night to watch that.
But so are millions of Americans, and so are millions of people of all races around the world.
Yeah.
Around the world.
That's what's so significant about the royal family. And even though the queen has passed, I'm still going to refer to the queen as being the active member, because in both this documentary, she was still alive during the time that they were talking. And the fact that in all of our lifetimes that, you and I just being here talking, but in everybody who's kind of up now, nobody was like a functioning adult when the last monarch existed,
exactly.
So the this thing about the British family, like, it's so weird, because as much as I am anti-monarchist and want to reject it, I can't help that I also get caught up in the stuff, and I watch the documentaries, and I do this, and I
but Sharmane, I mean, why would
it is a part of my culture. It is.
But even if you were just like the rest of us Americans, for whom it might not be tracing anything to that particular country, I guess my thing is, why wouldn't you? And the other thing is, it also represents, again, I'm going to go old school, the origins of this here USA.
Mm-hmm.
That's the parent country.
It's the parent country,
culture. That there isn't any other.
Yeah, no,
that's
true.
The parent country and the parent culture is part of why we are who we are, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But so I guess, I don't personally feel an attachment to it, but I completely
But you saw how, like, even Black Americans were mourning the loss of the Queen on the Facebooks and stuff. Like, she was so special. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think I get it. I mean, for all the things, we can dissect that, but I want to get to the documentary. But
let's get into
really
it.
Glad you gave that context, because it's essential, and it's essential to remember that is what this country was born out of, and in response to, and in rebellion against.
Yeah,
and that the folk who came here were the bottom of the British barrel, y'all. Yeah. Let us be. I'm not trying to crack on anybody's relatives. I'm including my own up in here.
Yeah, they weren't the fancy folk, because the fancy folk. The fancy folk might come here to set up a plantation, peace out, and let the poorer people look after things like that. There was absolutely some of that going on, but for the most people, the dregs of society were the people who came here.
Dregs, baby, dregs.
And that, that was super British too. Do you even use that word, dregs? But it's
such a good word, though.
It is a good word. But so I feel like it's important to lay that out, because what I don't know that the documentary did, like, when you go into this documentary, or even if you go into like the show The Crown, which I do think The Crown does a good idea of sort of showing us what British royal life might kind of look like, even though some of it is fictionalized, of course. I don't think that people realize that even though she is the queen, she's not the boss. She is the boss of that family. She's not the boss of the country. So, like, the things that she does and says doesn't necessarily have a major impact on the governance of the country. So I say that, and the reason why I think that's important is because at the end of the day, you have essentially the most famous person on the planet dictating who in her own family gets to be popular for public consumption. Yes. And so when you get, she's got these 4 children, 2.5 of which are disastrous. Like, she's got Charles, Andrew, and Edward? Yeah, Edward. Edward's a non-entity. You never think about him. He did get a divorce. Nobody cares. No one remembers. Why do I know? I guess because I'm British and I just know. But, like, people don't give a shit about him. He's fine. He doesn't get into a lot of drama. Moving on. Andrew, fucking pedophile, definitely uses his resources as British royal to get access to rich people and young girls. Charles is a weird one, because as a husband, he was a horrible person to Diana. He's also very much a product of neglect and abandonment issues and stuff like that related to his mother, abuse from his father. He actually was really progressive in terms of the rest of his family members, and this all predates his time with Diana, where he was like, he wanted to learn Welsh to be like, if I'm going to be Prince of Wales, I need to actually speak Welsh and understand Welsh culture a little bit, where his family did not want him to do that. They didn't want him to justify or validate Welshness in the UK of it all. He is a person that he's supposed to be the future head of the Church of England, but he studied all different kind of religions. He was really interested in other religions, and he wanted to find a way to interweave them into more of like an intersectional church type of thing, which was not going to be possible in the Church of England. So he always had to tamp that down, but he couldn't help it. People figured it out. He's really into, he really just wanted to be an architect. Like, that's all he wanted. He wanted to build like palatial estates. That's what he wanted to do. But he didn't really have that option. And then when it came time for them to pick his wife, they didn't think Camilla was attractive enough. So they stopped it at every turn. So she eventually just got married. Their relationship continued on, so that by the time they gave him the more attractive Diana, he was done. If they had just let him have Camilla, you would have not had, well, we wouldn't have known Diana, you wouldn't have had Wills and Haz, but you would have saved probably a lot of trauma that family inflicts on each other and experiences. And then you get to Diana and the boys, and of course all the stuff that, most of us know. We grew up, they grew up in front of our eyes. We all adored them. We thought they were adorable kids, blah, blah, blah. Diana was everything. When she dies and we see them mourn her publicly, which is one of the hugest things as a British person to see your monarchs like literally mourning in front of you. That was so insane, and that endeared those boys to the population forever. So we were always going to be paying attention to who they partnered up with, and as it ended up happening with him and Kate, people went nuts for Kate when she first became the chosen one or whatever. Over time, people got to see that she wasn't kind of the nicest person in the world, so they stopped caring about her. And then you get Megs. And Megs comes in here. First of all, she's American, so she's worse than a commoner. Because like Diana technically was because dregs, right? Like Diana technically was a commoner in that, yes, she has a father and a titled family and everything like that, but they're not at the highest level of the British aristocracy. So while she is still an eligible person for one of the princes to marry, she had a public life. She didn't have to, or she had a private life. She didn't have to have a public presence and stuff like that until she married Charles. Meghan's not even like that. Meghan is just some girl off the street as far as they're concerned. Like, they have no reference for her, or they can't make a comparison of what American society hierarchies look like compared to what British society hierarchies look like. Like, Kate is technically just a regular ass commoner, but far back her family did have some things. Like almost every, how black people all claim that they're Native American, whether or not they know they are? All British people have a Duke or Duchess or somebody in their family from way back, right? That's one of those things. So they could claim somebody. They had to do this like genealogy thing to try to figure out who she could claim just to justify her being in the running. And then they just established her parents as they gave her parents titles to justify her level, blah 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 blah. With Meg, you couldn't do that because she was an American, and so you couldn't establish her parents. You couldn't grant her parents titles because they weren't UK citizens, and sort of like on the back end justify her placement alongside of a prince. You couldn't do that with her. So for I was going to say Haz again, but for Harry to say, no, this is the one I'm going to marry, and the system just had to scramble around it. I think because Harry was the Queen's like favorite grandchild. I think they kind of let things go. Plus, they're coming off the back of all the Diana stuff. They're like, let's just let it happen and see what happens. And I think the family probably did seem to like her more than the system allowed. And that's what gets us into the documentary, is that the documentary shows how much the system dictated what was allowed to happen. And every time, because she's not trained by this culture and this society, every time Megs stepped out of the mold, rather than explain why this doesn't work, they just go, you did it wrong. No additional training, no follow-up. Then she does something wrong again, and it continues to spiral out of control until she's just a problem that can't be solved. It's the same thing with Diana. Diana didn't get trained to roll with it.
There was no Princess Diaries.
There's no Princess Diaries
with Julie Andrews.
There's nothing like that. That's what they needed. And so you end up having a repeat of what happened with Diana, which is, I think what's the difference between Diana and Kate is that Kate probably went full institutionalized immediately. Like,
Kate leveled up, and Kate was happy to level up, and Kate was grateful to level up, and Kate was smart enough to read the room and probably found her a Julie Andrews consultant coach.
Probably did. Because if Kate's going to be the future queen, there's going to be an expectation of her that's going to be a lot different.
Right.
And she basically, you had to make the decision. Are you going to give up your identity for the person that you love? Okay, here's how you do that. And exactly. I think, you know, there are ways in which she messed up in the beginning too. We saw her titties. She was just sunbathing on a fucking vacation, and a camera took a picture of her, and so everybody knows that, you know, we see the future Queen of England's titties. Like, that was something that happened for her in the beginning. Just like Diana, she accidentally didn't wear a petticoat once, and her dress was kind of see-through, and you could see, oh my god, the shape of her legs in the light. Oh my goodness, how did you do this? What a disgrace. And then something stepped up, there was a flip that switched with her, where she just became a member of the institution.
Princess Diaries.
She got Princess Diaries, I guess. That must be what happened. With Meghan, I think they didn't give her a chance to even get that far, and they granted no resources, because all the resources are pulled towards the queen and the future heirs. So...
Well, thank you for that. Can I come in now?
Yes.
Because the elephant in the room is... Yeah, and you can explain it. And thank you for that. First of all, thank you for all that. I just learned a lot in this few minutes, and I'm really no.
I kind of hate how much I know about the British family.
No, there's no way for me and probably most of us to know anything about this. How would I know? Yeah. So anyway, so I appreciate that, because I didn't have any kind of sense of the details. So I'm going to thank you. So important to understand. It makes, but the added layer. So. She's an American. She's been divorced.
That's right. I didn't say that.
She's no offense, Megan, but she's a B-level actress on a TV show that not a lot of people have heard of or watched.
Most people probably heard of it because she dated Harry, to be fair.
That's when most people became aware of Suits, right? I remember seeing her, and I can't remember the name of it right now, so forgive me. When my kids were growing up, it was some money show where you had to guess
the cases, where she had to hold on to the cases.
And I remember thinking, oh yeah, she's really cute. She looks like she might be mixed. I remember that conversation with my kids as we were watching it as a family. But only because later on, when I saw her acting resume or her performing resume, so you have all of that. She was divorced. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, but and you can help me with this, but this is now through my lens from day one, okay, that through the scope of everything you just described, all things British, the royal family, the government, the media, the populace, and everything else. I'm sorry, but she's black.
She's black.
She's black. She's blackity black, blackity black.
Because you could plug and play her story with a white American. Everything else is the same. Her career, all the other stuff is the same. She's just a white American. She's still suffering. She's still having a lot of troubles. But what she's not going to have is the race stuff.
She's not going to have and the stuff that wasn't necessarily overtly race. But so from my perspective, when she started dating Harry and it became public, when they went Instagram official, as they said, or when the news, I was like, who?
Yeah, I didn't know who she was.
Like a lot of us,
I did not know who she was.
Okay, she mixed. Okay, oh, that's interesting. I immediately was like, oh, they ain't gonna let this happen. Like now again, y'all know, I was like, there is no way that these people are going to get married and procreate. Now that's just how I saw it.
That's what I thought too.
Okay, so you and I, from our very different perspectives, I was like, there ain't no way. I mean, really,
that's one of my favorite songs. Yeah, I was stunned. I felt like Harry was basically forcing the system to have to adapt to the decision that he made, and by making it public without the normal way that relationships are announced, that was going to happen. And I ultimately thought they weren't going to be able to stay in the family, but I thought that was going to happen before they got married. I did not expect them, like when I realized that they were actually getting into the wedding day, and when they moved it to Windsor and all that other kind of stuff, I realized like every step of what they did, while they still allowed it to be the big extravagant show, them moving venues of where they normally get married, or they doing things like that, like all of that was telling me the system is not okay, but the public was down, so they have to adjust to a certain extent. They have to give the public what they want, but still try to control the narrative in such a way that the public eventually gets back onto the system side.
Absolutely. It's all about, it's 1,000% about power control and nothing else. And we know that. So it's all power, it's all control. And they're like, oh, this little negress.
Yeah.
Okay,
like how dare.
Negress is finna, marry into this family. Okay. Okay, and she got her lovely, beautiful, charming black mama, who's a yoga teacher in California, and lovely. And she got, her friend Serena, some other friends up in here, and and they're all like, But listen, there was no way, and somebody would have to, who's an expert in this, would have to tell me I'm wrong. There is no way they're okay with this.
Yeah.
There is every black person who they like, love, have a relationship with could have stood there and sang Negro spirituals for 2 days. There is no way that this entity, this system, this institution is going to be okay with a single drop.
Yeah.
Okay. And so here she come, and they get married, and they got the little color stuff happening. But I'm with you. I'm like, the whole time I'm like,
I was amazed that they ended up having a public wedding. And I'll be honest, I didn't actually watch it. This was the first royal wedding that was public that I did not watch when it happened. I watched it a couple weeks later, mostly because people were hitting me up, because I wasn't militantly mixed yet. I wasn't the show yet. I think I was still living. I don't remember when they got married. But the reason why I was resisting it is because I was starting to finally stand up and resist the idolization of the monarchy by that point. Yeah. And in this case, it was like, yeah, she's a mixed woman and stuff like that. But to be frank, I didn't know about her until she got engaged. I didn't know who she was. I hadn't heard of her before.
Nobody.
So her being mixed wasn't really like a big pull. It was kind of like, oh shit, they're gonna have a mixed print, like that. It was a thought. I definitely had the thought, but I kept thinking it wasn't gonna happen, or that if it was going to happen, the rule was going to be that they would step out of the family. I thought that was definitely going to happen, and that maybe ultimately Harry would find that very stressful because, he's born in an institution. The fact that he's doing the work that he's doing now is insane. Like, it's insane that there's a member of the British royal family who is aware of microaggressions, who is aware, who can say those words.
He's aware of all of it. He's very aware.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always liked Harry, throughout his life, watching him grow and stuff. Even when he's made his teenage slips, he dressed up like a Nazi or whatever. He had his dick out in Las Vegas. We all saw the pictures. I get it, but I feel like these people they have no regular life. So if they fuck up in a hotel room in Vegas, I'm not tripping. They're,
No,
you
I
know,
got you. I don't think I feel you with all
stuff
that.
like that. Like,
This
I'm
is
not
fine.
really tripping. I would need him to be overtly just like spewing out hate speech or something like that for me to be really, really concerned that like he just doesn't have access to brown people is what I'm assuming. When he likes and falls for
But he has
Meghan,
spent time on the continent.
that's the thing with Harry. So this is something that is more about Harry than anybody else, because Will's has stayed out there too, but it didn't impact him the way that it impacted him, Harry. Diana loved her mission work in Africa that involved the mines. And she did something that was insane for any royal to do. She walked out where the mines were, knowing that she could potentially cause harm. But she did that to scare them into demining that area, the landmines, so that place could be safe. She put herself at risk for that. That was a huge thing that she did when she did it. And that's that person who got into Harry, who raised that portion of time that she had access to Harry, who raised him to be like, these are human people who are suffering atrocities that even our people, British people do not suffer. Or the white British or the English, I guess, do not suffer. So once he started going to Africa, he was falling in love, but he was grieving when he got to spend time there. And he got in touch with a family that really took him in and nurtured him. And in doing that, those things started to chip away at him, whether he knew it or not, starting to chip away with him. And so the fact that he became attracted to even, a light-skinned black woman was probably just a version of that. Like, he spent a lot of time around black folks. And by the time he saw her, he was like, I like that one. He also took her on their first real date.
He also might not have known that she wasn't white.
That is possible too, which is a surprise because that comes up in the documentary a few times about how white adjacent she was and accepted in whiteness in a way that is always very foreign to me. When light-skinned, black, white, biracial folks say, even the ones that are raised in whiteness, when they have white acceptance, like whether or not they're because in Meghan's case, like her hair as a child was all the way.
Well, no, we're going to talk. We're going to do a whole segment of this show about her hair.
Yeah, when her hair, the fact that she got white adjacency or white acceptance with her hair as a child.
Do we want to dive into that right now, or do we want to wait?
Well, I feel like now she presses it and all that kind of stuff. You can't really tell. There are times when if she turns a certain way.
Also, okay, look. I'm from Seattle. You're from Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
She grew up in Southern California.
Yeah.
So curly hair, I mean, definitely got curly hair, right? White adjacency doesn't mean people thought she was white.
No, that's why I was saying white adjacency and white acceptance.
So people of all races get white adjacency, including dark chocolate people and everything else. I mean, you can have white adjacency. It means that white people, for whatever reason, and there's a million reasons that we don't have time to go into here, are comfortable enough with you. They've decided that they're comfortable. It's about comfort.
Yeah.
Their comfort. That they're comfortable enough with you to let you in. And they did it in all kinds of people. They did it in deep chocolate people, But so the white adjacency isn't just phenotype or isn't just the fact that she is mixed.
Yeah, that's not how I was using it.
So, no, I know. But I'm just saying, I feel you. I get you. But so my number one takeaway, because it might be a good segue into it. Here's my big takeaway from the documentary, which, by the way, I recommend people watch, because even though we all were inundated with the headlines and the viral stories and everything else, it really, and again, you've done a beautiful job. You actually should have been in the documentary with what you shared here today. I'm not joking, though, because most of us wouldn't have any idea the nuance that you presented, including with Diana and reminding about the minefields. I had forgotten about all that. You just did a beautiful journalistic job. So I want to thank you. No, it's really important, Sharmane. I'm really serious. It's really critical to understanding another culture is having someone who knows that culture at least more than you and has enough intimacy and fluency in it to explain nuances. That's why I'm so adamant about these when it comes to all aspects of culture and identity, right? And I don't pretend to be fluent in even aspects of my own DNA that I'm not
Right.
I want to sit back and learn and listen and absorb and better understand. So anyway, my main takeaway, because it is segueing with what you said. So white adjacency, whatever it is that Meghan had. My takeaway is that, and I get it. I too am from the West Coast. I too am mixed, and I am phenotypically very close to Meghan.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I get it. But the takeaway for me was, and it wasn't a surprise. I mean, it was all confirmed by the documentary, and they did a beautiful job of telling and owning their story in the documentary. Beautifully done. Definitely worth watching. And this isn't specific to Meghan, but she's, to me, a symbol of it that we can utilize to have this conversation about mixedness and about parenting mixed children. That her beautiful mother, I don't know anything about her daddy other than he started acting
he started wild.
Fool the minute this was announced. So I don't know nothing. And she did a good job. So apparently he was somewhat of a decent co-parent, and they had a somewhat decent relationship before he lost his entire mind.
Yeah.
But the big issue I saw was when it's like you and I, from our different perspectives, the minute it was announced they were dating, before they were engaged, I was like, that ain't never gonna happen. You know,
yeah.
Meghan didn't have that. Okay? Meghan didn't have that. If she did, she didn't share it in the documentary. Okay? And so what Meghan in this situation represented on a worldwide stage, to me, is mixed Black with anything else, but specifically Black, white, biracial children who are raised with a sense of racelessness.
Yes. This was very hard for me to wrap my head around.
It's racelessness. That's why she could be curly until she wasn't. But it's racelessness. And a lot of times, and I think Ms. Doria is an example. And again, this is not a criticism, folks. It's not a judgment. It's none of those
She's
things.
Just it's doing what
observation.
Yeah.
That a lot of parents of all races who have and raise mixed children, including Black people whose kids are mixed with Black, and there's nothing inherently evil or malevolent about it.
Right.
But it ends up, and I think if I were going to teach a course on this, I would use this documentary as the text.
Right.
This is a case study for anybody to look at, that when you're raised with a sense of racelessness or vagueness, now again, especially in the US, and especially if your mix includes Black. I'm not qualified to talk about any other country. Okay. Right. That you could believe that love conquers all. Yeah. You could be a beautiful, charming, I mean, she makes a great royal or princess. Where she's
she's very
graceful and elegant,
welcoming,
and classy,
and stuff,
all the things. Yeah. Right? Just, she seems organically so. If she was using her acting skills, she pulled it off. She was always lovely. The camera adores her. You know, just all those good things. So she didn't come with any deficits. But what surprised me, and you know, part of it's I'm old enough to be her mother. I'm probably her mother's age, if not a little older. Was this it's a popular narrative. It's the popular narrative of love conquers all.
Yeah.
The common woman married, the prince kisses. I mean, we grow up.
It's the fantasy that they've taught us to have. Yeah.
That narrative from Disney, from fairy tales, from rom-coms, from everything from childhood to adulthood. Okay. So it played perfectly into that narrative that we have all been indoctrinated with, every single one of us. Yeah. And so, you know, and then there's that underlying narrative that is specific and I think relevant to mixed folks and maybe Black folks, because a lot of people call her Black, some don't, some argue, whatever. That's going to happen forever. But that when you add that to the story, okay, that's going to become the dominant theme. Even in what I would consider classic British fashion, they were low key about it. They were passive aggressive about it. Whereas in this country, they wouldn't have been low key and they wouldn't have been passive aggressive.
So the little asterisk, I guess, that I'll throw in right here in terms of British culture and how they deal with mixed people is that in the way that mixed people, and when I say that, I'm specifically talking about people that are mixed with black and white. There's far more representation of black, white, biracial in British culture. They're available. People know they exist. They will acknowledge them as like, you're half right. You know, like that's a real common way in which they're interacted with. So like it's not like here where you find out someone's mixed and you're like, oh my God, you know, like where the culture seems to react so big, like, oh wow, they're a mixed person. And then we get to decide if they get to be black or if they get to be whatever they're mixed with. Whereas in the UK, the black biracial has a place in the culture and in representation. So they're used to that. They call them half and half or whatever. That, you know, sometimes they call them mixed. But in the way in which they'll use like you're mixed right, fill in a very, you know, like I'll call it aggressively passive statement about black people. You're not as essentially saying you're not as bad as what we're saying all black, you know, full black people would be. Right. They immediately do it. So it's kind of like I'm acknowledging that you're mixed, and here's where I'm acknowledging that you're not like the others, and so you're more comfortable. And it is far more common. So like the pearl clutch that existed when Meghan came forward, I think was less about her being a mixed person. I think it's actually easier that she was a mixed person versus a full black person.
Oh, well, full black person, first of all, if she was full black,
it would have been so difficult. Like that person would have had to been a Candace Owens level ignorant of blackness to get that far.
I don't think they would have let him marry.
I don't think they would have let him marry either, but it just would have been harder to get through those loops. It was a lot easier. This is one of those examples in which like being mixed did kind of like, well, it might not be that bad. Let's go ahead and see what happens. So that I put that out there to say that like it wasn't a big shock to the culture. I think that she was mixed. I think that was actually a lot more palatable, a lot more easy if it was gonna be an outsider that it was a mixed person, a light-skinned presenting person, than a darker skinned black person. But it allowed them to just kind of like, yeah, British people are actually far more direct, but it's in such a polite manner when they do it that it's not unlike overt Southern racism. It's just got a cute little accent, and there's always a compliment at the end.
Well, yeah, but the compliment is part of,
it's passive aggressive, of course, but that's what fools Americans into thinking that they're not really actually that racist. Like, I've actually even had people tell me that obviously British people weren't racist, or at least my Nana wasn't, because she married my grandfather. Meanwhile, we had like gollywogs and Jim Crow stuff in our house that she found cute, but was completely racist towards the people that were growing up in her house, her own children, her own grandchildren.
Right.
And she was just like, no, it's just cute. It's fine. So to think that British people aren't as overtly racist or aware of race as much as Americans are is definitely false.
I want to thank you for that, because that's an ongoing conversation, not only in mixed spaces, but among Black Americans. Mm. So I want to really thank you for that. I want y'all to highlight, bold, italicize.
Yeah. Like, don't idolize the British because they have a nice accent. They're doing the same shit.
That's part of our white supremacist indoctrination.
Yeah.
But they are no less racist.
No less racist.
Again,
right.
You're like, so okay. So thank you for the context. Super important. So okay, so her mixedness, they're looking at it, but still, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, as Jay-Z would say, but I won't say it. Title of that song. Okay. So still. Okay. There's degrees and there's things, but still.
Yeah.
Okay. Because whiteness always, it's still. All right.
Because what you can really see in the documentary is that she, like, the concept of can't win for losing was literally a part of everything she did. If she showed up for poor people, it was, oh, but she must be Muslim, or she must be supporting them because they're Black too. It wasn't just like she's a royal and her job is to show up to this event that involves poor people. It wasn't that. It was, she picked these specific poor people because they're black or something like that. Like she couldn't do regular royal duties where her like empathy was not called into question, where her like, you know, whether or not she's being, you know, authentic in those moments were always called in question, in a way that doesn't happen with the white royals. Because do you think Charles fucking grew up enough around of diverse enough people that he doesn't say stupid shit like the clip that they have in that thing was him at a hip-hop event, or maybe it was in a different documentary. He was at an event where like kids were doing b-boy dances and stuff like that, and there was a DJ and he said groove on that dope beat or something like that, in the most white man British way ever.
Well, that's who he is. But
That's who he is.
The institution is
but they don't call him into question about his lack of authenticity in that moment, where they would do that for.
But he's not. But he can do anything, and he's like you talked about Andrew. I mean, they can do anything. Their authenticity isn't going to be questioned. They're born. They're to the manner born. Isn't that the way it's said?
Yeah.
They're to the manner born. I mean, they're not. There's nothing they can do to have their authenticity questioned. They might act all the way out.
Yeah.
Right. But so here comes. So you have this coming together of this institution and of this woman, this young, beautiful, charming, lovely woman. And I want to pause here because my second takeaway from the documentary, it's not that I ever doubted it. Because I have very little interest in anything royal. I've never watched Crown. I never will, all that kind of stuff. So it's really good because we have a nice contrast here. I came away really, really, and this is hard to do, y'all. I'll just tell you this. Impressed with their love story. They seem to really, yeah. And that is hard to, that's something that's, I mean, just because I've been through some things, you know, and all that. No. So when I'm hard to win over, but when you win me over, it's because I really I would go to bat for them as a couple. Yeah. I would go to bat after watching that doc, and I didn't have any doubts before. I just didn't have enough interest to have an opinion before. But I have to say that before I was like, oh, they're so cute together, and no little Archie ain't gonna have no color. But anyway, I have to tell you, and respect for Harry throughout. This man chose this woman, loves her dirty draws, okay, and literally walked away. I mean, this is a love story for the ages, and I'm not saying this in any kind of idealistic painting over. He recognized and called out and challenged the racism. Yeah, he did. Okay, and he stood up and said, "This my wife. These my children. Peace out." Okay, ultimately, and because I'm not, and obviously, very moving and very authentic for me anyway, I'm not going to let them do to my wife what they did to my mama. Man, that was, like, it's just hit me in the gut, because I remember him saying this, like, when it happened, like, when that actually, and, like, the way it ripped me to shreds to hear him say that. Because he has been vocal. He's been they've tried to stamp him down for it, but he has been vocal about the media definitely being responsible for his mother's death, in particular paparazzi. Absolutely responsible. No question. He was just seeing, and he even acknowledged there were times I wasn't seeing it. There were times when the institutional version of me was looking at my wife and saying, stiff up her lip. But ultimately, when it clicked, when it all clicked into place, the parallels were too obvious that he going to have to mourn every woman that he loved, right? Like, which essentially I assume is his mother, grandmother. Like, be clear. And I'm gonna say this, y'all, and you can call me a conspiracy theorist. If they'd stayed there, she might have died. Yeah. Something might have happened to Meghan. I'm not trying to put it in the universe. This is just looking at history, logic, patterns. So y'all, they could not allow that. Because when Diana died,
the Queen and the royal family themselves had plummeted in their popularity. They were pulling lower than Bush numbers. Like they were not people. The conversations about ending the monarchy was popping up and all this other kind of stuff. They were not doing well. But as white supremacy shows us, you wait it out, you smile at the right time, and 5-10 years later, they weren't holding Diana's death against the royal family like they had originally. And so or the press, or at least the populace, I guess, wasn't. And they were back to forgiving and loving the Queen and loving the royal family and all this kind of stuff. And then you see what starts to happen with Meghan. And it's like everybody fucking forgot what happened to Diana. And it was like, well, she should calm the fuck down and just accept it. She wants to be a royal. This is what comes with the thing. Were they saying shit like that to Diana? I don't remember, but I do remember them crying as a whole nation about the death of Diana. I remember them telling Charles that he was responsible for the death of Diana. I remember that kind of stuff happening in the crowds and shit like that. So all you have to do in terms of the royal family is to wait long enough. So if they had stayed and something had happened to Meghan or Archie, or even Lilibet, had she been born there, that they would have just had to wait it out. Give them another 10 years or something like that. The world would forgive them and they could just be in existence anymore. But Harry wasn't going to deal with that. Harry wasn't going to mourn his wife and child in the way that he wasn't going to let that happen. And I think
he knew it would happen.
And he knew it would.
Let's be real clear. He knew it would happen.
One of the most jarring moments, too, of the whole documentary series, which is something that I absolutely believe happened, even though we only have one side of this story, is when they waited till Meghan left the country to pull Harry into the meeting that determined their future. Mm-hmm. First of all, that happened, not a surprise. 100% would have expected them to exclude her in that decision-making process.
Of course.
But what jarred me the most was Harry's face when he describes his brother Will, who everybody has had Will's back forever, because just like Harry, he lost his mom too. When he says that he slammed on the table and started screaming about basically get in line, I can 100% see that. Like, I've seen Will turn from the Wills everybody loved to the institutionalized Will over the last, like, especially and since he got married. But like the guy that I see now doesn't make me feel like Diana's boys. Like every time you saw them, you would think Diana's boys. But the last like 5 or 6 years, I haven't looked at him like that at all. And I could completely picture that moment that he got into this, like they had to start institutionalizing him as much as they could because he's the future king of England.
Absolutely.
And for him to scream at his brother, which was basically his best mate his whole life, and be like, get in line. And his younger brother, that he was saying, I'm not here to protect you anymore. I'm the future king of England, essentially.
That's right.
That moment was the thing that, like, and I saw, because he's like, basically, I had to make the call without even consulting Meghan in that moment. We're out. We're done. I'm going to start packing my bag. And that's what that will always endear Harry to me as a member of the royal family, that he was just like, it took him no time.
Right.
Because at that point, he probably already started the grieving process to a degree, like that he wasn't going to be, like that he was going to have to step back enough just to make peace for the family itself, for his grandmother in particular. But in that case, that he was like, I know that this means I might not see any of my family again, but I'm out. Yeah. Because I chose this woman and I chose to have these children, and that's it. That was jarring. It made me really sad, but also it really endeared him to me forever for that, because
absolutely. I'm telling you, I just was like, okay, that's really a hell of a man.
Yeah.
I mean that in the best possible way, that in we can get into gender roles and patriarchy, but that's not what I mean. I mean, that is a person of integrity who allowed his love for his wife and child to be his priority, and for their well-being, and for somebody, for the average white person anywhere in the world, the average white person who, every once in a while, regular white people really do have light bulb moments about racism. This is a generalization, but I'm just saying. And it does happen.
And you can forgive them for having to have that moment because society and control and culture is telling them that they're the center of the universe.
Well, I mean, they are the center of the universe. They are, in fact, the center of the universe.
Yeah.
So institutionally and systemically, certainly in this country anyway. But anyway, yeah, so they are the center of the universe. That's just a fact. But what I want to say is that, it does happen, and always glad when it does, but that he, of all people, and everything you've shared with us here today, and everything we know about the monarchy and the royal family and British and the Commonwealth and all the things, that's really, to me, phenomenal. That he's not just a regular guy.
It's a mountain of gold that he said goodbye to for his family.
Everything. He said goodbye to everything for the love of and the protection of this woman and child. And I know and that was just really beautiful. And I'm so glad they made the documentary, because I'm just like, I'm rooting for them as a family.
I am too.
I'm rooting for them as a family.
And you just can't stress that there's no equivalent. It's not like
none.
A rich celebrity in America leaving the country because she had an abusive husband or something like that, and so she's going to restart her life in another country. There's nothing like that. There's no job. There's no role that Harry can go into now that is even remotely equivalent to what he was raised in. He is going to have to learn how to be a regular ass person. Now, of course, by regular ass person, I still mean a person of immense privilege, because they have a lot of money and they can make a lot of money off of their name and shit like that.
They got a Netflix deal.
Yeah.
They're up there with the Obamas. They got a multi-million dollar. They're going to be fine.
They're going to be fine.
Look at their friends. They're friends with J&B. They're friends with Serena. And her husband,
Tyler Perry is Lilibet's grandfather, godfather.
Come on, y'all. It's not like we in the same tax bracket or even live in the same reality. But again, that's why I think this is a good case study. But I want to circle back just one time to the raceless thing, because this was the big takeaway.
Yeah, there was something I wanted to say about that.
Perspective for me. No. I think all this is important, and it all interweaves seamlessly. So my message to all people raising mixed children, whether you mixed yourself or you're not, whatever, is to, regardless of what they look like, regardless of what culture they are raised in or around, regardless of the environment they're raised in, regardless of how they grow up to identify or affiliate with any or all of the cultures within them. And I'm going to be real specific here. I think that it relates to all parts of mixedness that aren't white. But I think and again, I'm having a U.S. perspective here, although I don't think this is unique to the U.S. But I think that when the mix is black and anything else, this is for Ms. Doria and people like this, a plea that it is your responsibility to raise your child to understand political blackness, historic, economic, social, political blackness, not to tell them whether they are or aren't black. And they could look like Archie and Lil Bit, okay? Mm-hmm. Okay? And they can look like me, and they can look like Megan, and they can look like you. That's not the point. And the point isn't how they grew up to identify, or again, all the things I listed. But no matter what, if they've got, I'm going to use the term, and I mean this in the political historical sense, one drop, then it is the parent's responsibility. I'm saying this because I was blessed with that kind of parent. My Jewish, not black mama, okay? To help me understand political blackness as the reality of the world you have to navigate, be it your suburban hood, your hoodie hood, your urban hood, or the freaking royal family and monarchy of the United Kingdom, and everything in between. Because the empathy I felt for Meghan and the suffering that she had to endure, I think was in part because she walked in with some level of raceless myopia.
Yeah, and what was hard for me to wrap my
criticism. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
Right? Because I wanted to protect her. I wanted to run in front of her. Go, okay, girlfriend, come over here. I'm not Julie Andrews in Princess Diaries, but I'd have been like Mixed Aunties saying, boo, 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 boo. Let's talk about what you can expect. And I don't even know, I would have had to have you leading the conversation because I don't understand this thing you tried to walk into. But baby girl, listen.
Yeah.
You gonna have to understand. They're gonna hate you.
This is a really good example about how the thoughts and perspectives of other people influence your own identity, because I 100% believe she did not identify as Black, neither politically or racefully. I think that she did acknowledge herself as a mixed person, but just thought that she was raceless in a different way than, like, when I say I'm raceless, which I have said for years, or I say I don't have a race, meaning you can't look at me, an outsider can't look at me and say 100% I know that you fit into this racial category.
But that's ambiguous looking.
That's an ambiguous thing, but the ambiguous thing still puts me in a way in which, okay, could I walk into, and this is a real example, the DMV here in Texas and claim Black on the paper because they only give me one race category to pick, and the woman behind the counter says, your name is Sharmane Latrice, meaning that's all I needed to know in terms of someone telling me you're going to pick Black because that's what you got going on. But I can't walk down the street and someone peg me necessarily as either Black or Asian. In that case, I don't have a race. In the way in which she is raceless is literally, it doesn't come up. Like, to have two different colored parents, even divorce two different colored parents, for it never to be a common topic at some point that it comes up, like a school principal gets surprised that your dad is white, or things like that those types of incidences didn't occur throughout her life to even subtly prepare her for what it was. Like, in the ways in which she described her early acting career, where they would put her out for everything, she was just kind of thinking of it as just sort of having a general look and a general attractiveness. She wasn't thinking about the reason why you're ambiguous and could fit in these categories is because you're mixed and da-da-da-da-da. Whereas me, like, I will move, understanding I look the way that I look, I still move in political Blackness because that is the part one that I was raised more closely identifying to, but that is the part in which I have more impact with the moves I make, whereas someone like her, going her whole life sort of raceless, she had to become Black to be that princess. And in doing that, I think it has now affected the way she currently identifies, which is like, the world made me aware that I'm a Black woman. I did not know I was a Black woman until the world made me aware of it. And so now I have to move forward with the understanding, and whether or not that affects her personal identity versus just her political identity or even her public identity. She just has to do that now. But until she dated a prince, that didn't come up. It didn't come up in her previous marriage. It didn't come up in her job. Somehow she managed to float. And I make a joke about it being the freckle effect. Because she has freckles, she was able to go float through. It's a joke. It's not a real statement that I'm making. But that she could just go through, and if someone didn't want to deal with the race that she may or may not be, they would just not address it, and she could just move. Whereas I can't enter a space where my race or ethnic identity does not come up from outside of me.
And I look like Meghan, but I can't either.
Yeah, but you can't either.
So it's hard for me to look at her.
Yeah. It's like, how did it never happen for you?
I pay for her hair texture, by the way. But it's hard for me to look at her and her fuller lips than I have, But it's hard for me to look at her and understand. Because
it was really hard.
It's really hard. And
Yeah.
I did want to, run in front of her and protect her like an auntie. But also, it's really hard for me to look at her and go, well, girlfriend, I'm questioned by every single human that lays eyes on me.
But I think that has more to do with the where we grew up and the proximity to the people that we grew up with. There's an
well, we grew up
an air.
We both grew up in Black environment.
Yeah, and so I think even when we don't speak, when all that people have to decide in those few first seconds of seeing us what category we fall into for them, we have an air. I think that even if we're silent, we're giving off there's something going on here that is Black aligned.
Absolutely, because most Black people but you're something.
Yeah, but you're something, right? You're something. Whereas someone like Meghan, I am surprised because she has a Black mother and because she grew up in LA and stuff like that. But I understand the neighborhood she grew up in too, same type of thing. Right. I am surprised that she was able to do that, and yet she's not the first person I've heard. Like, just doing this show alone, I've had several people that have surprised me with this thing of like, I am Black white, but I had white. I will say just acceptance in meaning that they're accepted as white because or white-ish. It's a different. We don't have a word for it yet. We don't have because it's not like
white adjacent.
It's not. It's different than white adjacency. It's different than white passing. It's basically like maybe you're not white, but you're white enough.
You're white-ish
to not address this being an issue.
Right. You're not making us address it. Whereas they always do. But
they always do. And with me, they always do. But I think that has to do with more like, there's obviously something that we give off subtly before we even open our mouths. And then opening our mouths confirms the rest of the whatever's going on in their brains, right? It happens to me with Black people too, where, especially when I was wearing the mask, where someone would say, it would finally come up asking me what I was or something, and I would say, I'm Black and Japanese, and they're like, I heard a little flavor in that voice. So like, there's already ways in which
absolutely
we're constantly confirming that we're Black aligned in a way that she's probably constantly concerning that she's white aligned, but she's had to learn. I hate that I'm about to say this. She's had to learn to be Black real quick.
But I don't know if she's learned to be Black.
She hasn't, but
she hasn't learned to be Black. She's learning to, but she's
learning the words to say, the issues to follow, to pay attention to. I mean, fucking Harry is learning the issues to follow and pay attention to. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, Harry knows, right? That's
Harry's on his woke journey, and he's picking up microaggressions, and he's picking up, disenfranchisement and stuff like that. And he's got to think about it because he's got to think about how can he and his wife move into a room, and how will his children move in rooms when he's not present.
So I think he's on a more, he comes across, I can't say I am not sitting and hanging out with them, but based on the documentary, it comes across that he is more proactively on a learning curve.
Yes.
Where she was forced into it. But I want to do something with raceless, because I love the way you described it. But when I say raceless, so think of it like the camera, your phone camera.
Mm-hmm.
You can look
the front or the back,
front or back. And apparently there's a new phone where you can do both at once. But anyway, I just saw an ad. Of course they're going to keep doing that, right?
Why not?
Anyway, of course. Now, whether it's the iPhone 900 or whatever the heck. But anyway, I'm always like 2 behind whatever the newest post is. But okay. That when I meant the race, you described very, very importantly how the world sees you. What I'm talking about is how these mixed people are raised to see the world.
Yes, that's why I was saying it was so hard for me to grasp, because I'm viewing racelessness like the way that I'm existing. I couldn't wrap my head yet around.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's not how we're perceived. It's how we're perceiving the world and our place in it and how we move through it. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's what I mean by parents of mixed kids, whether you're mixed or not yourself. Please I'm going to go back to political Blackness, mm-hmm. or political whatever the thing is.
Yeah,
or
right.
The things are. That your child needs to understand from a historical, cultural, from some kind of objective perspective, the world they're in, right? The world they're in, and how those ancestors have had to navigate it, or what it means for people in that group again, whether you look like that group, align with that group, grew up with that group, or familiar with it, you need to understand it. So, right? Mm-hmm. So for instance, I have a nephew, right, in the Philippines, and his mom is Filipina. And of course, Filipinos are mixed. Mm-hmm. And then his dad is my brother, who's super mixed. So I call my nephew the most mixed person in the family. He's got more continents to check off than the rest of us. He's young, and he looks like I did as a child. Mm-hmm. Although I'm starting to see more of like his mom's side of the family as he gets older, bone structure and stuff. Hair like mine, coloring. So super ambiguous. There is no way anybody in the world is going to look at this child and guess what he is, including you and me. Okay. Yeah. Now, I sometimes think about if he were to come spend time here, let's say he grows up and says, I want to go hang out with Auntie in Atlanta and go to Morehouse. The acculturation I would have to do. Yeah. And it's not that my brother is any slouch. He is not. But
he lives in a culture that
hasn't lived in this country for a while. So, and he's acutely aware of everything. Don't get me wrong. There's no denial or ignorance, but it's different on the ground. And I'd be like, and I raised two light-skinned, ambiguous Black children. I didn't raise my children as mixed. There was no denial of mixedness. It's just like, you're Black, you light-skinned, you ambiguous, looking, da-da-da. Okay. So they got some, at least they grew up what I could give them with colorism and racism and all that. With some, I tried to give them some tools. So I believe it's really important. So my nephew needs to grow up with political Filipino-ness.
Yeah.
At least now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that he doesn't need but if he wants to come into this environment, my brother and I and his mom would put our heads together and say, okay, well, how are we going to navigate this part, which I live in and am entrenched in? Mm-hmm. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's my message, my plea, really, my loving request. Again, not a criticism, not a judgment, not a slam. But if you're raising a child, whatever their components are of their ancestry, of their culture, of their DNA, please do what you can to educate them and to equip them with the understanding they're going to need. Yeah. It's not so much how are they going to identify. Again, that's not so much what the world sees you as is what you are, not necessarily. Yeah. All those kinds of things. We can bust all those myths and just knock them all down because they're not useful. But the reality is whatever you can do to prepare your child so that they're not unprepared. Yeah. Right? Because racism, and the other isms are ever present for all of us. Yeah. Whatever isms that you qualify for, you're going to get to experience, be on the receiving end of them. Yeah. In your life, right? So that would be, if I could talk to Megan's mom, I'd say, baby, I get it. I get it. I'm mixed. I'm from the West Coast. Get it. No question. But I just wanted to grab your daughter and say, hold up, baby. Let's just discuss.
Yeah, it's like you almost wanted her entourage to be just filled with aunties. Like,
yes.
Just to be there to be like,
Jennifer Lewis to whoever, right? I mean, just like, baby, we need, she almost needed like a boot camp immersion.
She did.
Onboarding. That's what was missing. But of course, they couldn't onboard her. They were onboarding her with all what you described so beautifully, royal protocol. It's all about protocol and presence and presentation and the rules.
I mean, when you really understand like how relegated this family is, and this is not me trying to offer extra empathy for them or anything like that, but these are literally people who have lived no other life, so they don't know anything else. But they have rules about how they are meant to approach their grandmother.
Yes.
She's not grandma all the time to them. She is first their queen and then their grandmother. Right. They can't sit in certain places next to, or the hierarchy, they're supposed to sit in certain directions when they're just eating a family meal. Right. These are not normal people. They do not relate to each other in a family way in the way that most of us get a chance to relate to our families. So when you throw in outsiders and you do not train them, like there should literally be a royal protocol.
There should
like,
be an academy.
There's a royal protocol training for like when the prime minister brings their partner, which up in, you know, for all of it has been wives until Thatcher was the prime minister. There's a protocol like a quick course for the wives to know how to approach the queen. That's probably more work than was provided to Meghan or Kate. It's just that Kate institutionalized a lot easier than Meghan would have been able to, no matter what she tried. Even if Meghan was a mixed race British person, same things would have existed. The only thing that would be have taken out is the anti-American hate.
Right.
Literally the only thing. All the other stuff would have been exactly the same.
Exactly.
So I mean, it just in summary of all of this stuff, I think what was really special about the documentary is getting a chance to allow them to publicly address the stuff that under their control and under their voice that the world was deciding for them.
Yes.
I think you got to see her personality, even if she is an actress, you know, they still reveal who they are in different ways. She's still a human person.
Right.
You got to see her feeling like you got to watch her face be completely stunned by the way things were happening.
Right.
And I just feel, and since we got to see some of the video that they did on their own phones and when they had private moments, like I think you get a real sense for this was so unlike anything you could have prepared a human for. Could they have done better things to prepare her? 100%, absolutely. But to go in there without any protection and without anybody saying, at the end of the day, what we care more about is the successful marriages of these royal family members. That's not a priority. I mean, the hunker down and stick with it is a priority. Whether or not you actually love your partner, not a priority in that family, right?
Right.
But had they allowed that to be the priority, maybe they could have worked a little bit better to protect these two people who were members of this royal family. And I'm talking about the institution in this case, or the system.
But they threatened the institution.
They threatened the institution because they were popular and they were new. They were the new shiny thing.
They were popular, they were new, and she ain't white. I mean, again, y'all.
But yeah, like
you cannot ever let you. It's tempting.
You can't. This family can't stay isolated forever. At some point, they will either have to end, or they will have to allow these people to fall in love with who they want to fall in love with. And if that person happens to be a black person or a brown person, then they've got to protect that person too. Like they just have to start doing that. They're just going to fail otherwise. Because guess what happened? Once Charles got a chance to marry Camilla. And regardless of what people's memory of their relationship and how gross a lot of this stuff was between them and both of their Camilla and Charles' treatment of Diana, people fucking love them together now in the UK. They are, because they can see real love, like in the same way that we saw real love between Harry and Meghan. You can actually see real love between Charles and Camilla. Now, is it, British and stiff and stuff like that? Yes, but you see an affection between these two people that he never had for Diana. And what has happened? People like Charles again. They like Charles like they liked him before Diana came around.
So because I want to add a layer.
He's more authentic now than he ever got to be with Diana.
Well, that makes sense.
So if the system allowed these people to be in love with who they want to be in love with, and then protect them once they become a part of the institution, things would shift a little bit. Maybe not drastically.
Is there anything in the institutional history or makeup that would suggest that that's possible?
Well, Queen Charlotte was a mixed woman, and she had a very high level of attention and fame during the time that she was in existence. So it's not like they haven't had, it's like 300-400 years ago, but it's not like they haven't had black people in the royal family before.
But she was British.
Yes, but her mother came from, I believe, the Caribbean.
Right.
So she was a
product. She was a
product, yeah.
She was their product. Meghan's not their product. I'm not disagreeing that, there's a precedent, but again, it was a million years ago.
It was a million years ago.
And
but,
she was still in a different category.
And you didn't have the same level of public access that is now in existence, because
you
we
didn't
can
have
literally
the internet. You didn't 400 years ago, you didn't have television, you didn't have anything.
But people have seemed to forgive and forget about the whole Camilla Charles thing, and they're with it now because they see two people in love and they think a king and queen should maybe like each other. I think if they had given a little bit of that same grace to Meghan and Harry,
but they couldn't.
It's the first one out the gate. They're gonna have to the next one. And I'll show you the example. I do want to wrap up because it's getting way too long, but I'll tell you an example. Diana is essentially an outsider, although she is, a part of the aristocracy. She's just a lower level of aristocracy, a member of the aristocracy. She becomes a royal and everything like that. Yes, the population falls in love with her and everything like that. They weren't expecting that. Oh shoot, I lost my point. I had 3 tiers. Oh, here we go. So Diana gets in. She has to go through a whole bunch of shit to be able to become Diana, because she wasn't Diana in the beginning. Even though people were excited about her, her being who she came into, that's who everybody fell in love with. People were just excited about the fresh young bride at that time. But once she started becoming Diana, when she picked her causes and she started then, the way everybody fell in love with her was, made it easier for the idea that the next time a commoner comes in, Kate's transition was a lot smoother as a commoner coming in, because we already got to see it with Diana. So it's like enough years have gone by. This is actually not that big of a deal like we thought it was. So it's a lot smoother of a transition for this next one to come in. Another version of that will be when the first divorces hit with Fergie and even the Queen's sisters and the Queen's sister and stuff like that. When those divorces hit, they rocked the fucking thing because everybody remembers the abdication, and the abdication involved divorce and all this other kind of stuff, and it was very stressful for people to imagine that you're appointed by God fucking monarchs, which is what they think they are. Could fall in love with someone so flawed, a divorced person, and give up the throne for it. How dare they do something like that, so selfish? That scarred the royal family so hard, so that by the time the Queen's children started having divorces, she was having all that weight of the abdication came back and rushed on it. And so she dug in a little bit harder. But after the world saw that they can just exist and not fall apart because they were divorced, and all 4 of those kids got divorced. All 4 of her kids have been divorced at this point. And people were like, so what? Most of the population is divorced. That it was a lot easier for the next group of people who wanted to get divorced, which has to do with some of the younger royals. It's easier for them to get permission to divorce because the older royals went through that. So you have 2 different versions about how, like, once you introduce something that isn't how we do things, the first time is really rocky. The second time is not as rocky. By the third time, we're just moving on. Diana, commoner. Kate, commoner. Meg, commoner. But Meg has a different story. Meg is an American and she's a mixed race person. So it's not going to work this time. But if in the future, George or Charlotte end up finding love with a brown person or something like that, I bet you it'll be not as difficult, but still have some difficulty to let that pass. But it'll pass.
You make a great case. My prediction would be to be someone who's Japanese.
I mean, possibly.
Because of what you described earlier about the parallels with because that it wouldn't be a culture shock. You know what I mean?
It's so funny too, because like they will literally marry Germans or Italians. Like the European royals are almost all related to each other,
right? Because
of Victoria.
Yeah,
but because they're white, no big deal.
Right.
Although there's jokes about the ones that speak different languages, but it's not that big a deal. It's just once you throw a little melanin in that everything falls apart.
Well, because that's what Europe and the United States and other Western countries are built on.
Yeah, it would be interesting if it was a person of color that was also a royal for whatever country they come from.
That could be cool.
it would make sense in terms of the level of people that can come together. There's a shorter learning curve of how to maneuver and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting, and it probably would have been a lot easier had Meghan been a royal already.
Yeah, but she couldn't be royal in this country. So.
She could, yeah. Like if she was from somewhere else. One of the things that we didn't get to talk about, but I know we definitely need to wrap this up, and maybe it'll come up on another thing, is the idea that what the British royal family missed out on, opportunity-wise, in allowing her to become a member of the family and to go into the fold, is the support and adulation that was happening in all the other parts of the Commonwealth. The Black countries loved her.
Right.
Now, does that mean that she could have been a token and been used? Absolutely, that could have been the case. But that was an opportunity that they were blind to because they prioritized racism over the fact they were stressed out that those countries loved her so much, rather than viewing it as an asset.
Rather than it was a liability, seen as a liability. And my last point I want is to point out, take away from the documentary, how Black folks came through for them.
Yeah, ultimately, who saved her?
Black folks.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm just saying.
Which we're all sitting here going like, duh, but at the same time, even she was probably surprised by that.
I think she possibly was. Look, we need to get her on Militantly Mixed.
She could be on the list.
We'd be like, Megs, boo. We need to have a chit chat.
It's so funny because I think my British side of the family would come crawling if they found out that I got access to, if I had a second degree connection to Harry.
Harry.
It would have been wild. But anyways, so this is our first episode back, our first Mixed Auntie Confidential back for the new year. It didn't run long, and we actually could have probably made an episode for every episode to really kind of deal with all the different things that happen across this documentary. For those of you who haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend it. Not in the adulation of the royal family aspects of it, but in the complication about like mixed raceness and internal identity and external identity across borders, you know, in terms of the Western world, like the
realities.
Yes.
I mean, we literally, it was the closest thing that we in the United States, most of us, have to relate to is she stepped into a freaking Disney movie.
Yeah.
I mean,
like literally.
Or
literally.
It's
the fantasy that Disney has been promoting. Right? Yeah.
It was Princess Diaries. I mean, you know,
it's definitely really interesting. It sheds a light on like just the complete differences in which ways mixed people can be raised, because so much of aspects of her child rearing, her being reared, surprised the shit out of me as a fellow mixed person.
Me too.
You know? There was a lot, so I definitely recommend it for that purpose. And I'm open to having continued conversations with people who want to get into some of these things, because I am known even in my friend group and things like that as a partial Brit. I mean, instantly the amount of text messages I started to get right away and things like that. Like I am the unofficial British expert correspondent for my American friends. But I know what I know because I come from a British family, but I grew up here. So I still have a level of removal that I'm not sure I fully understand everything, but I guess I have a pretty good.
Oh, no. I want you to edit that out. And I want you to edit that out because, again, I want to thank you and I want to acknowledge what a beautiful job you have done. And I'm not exaggerating, so please don't edit this out. What a beautiful job you have done. And you are the British correspondent.
The mixed Brit correspondent.
Mixed Brit correspondent. Because, again, I'm completely obsessed with, if I want to know about a group, a culture, or something, I'm from the source. I'm also part journalist, so hey,
yeah.
But I've been like this before. Journalism is just an outlet that aligns with that personality trait I have. I want to hear it from the source, so that's why I've loved learning from you in this episode, and it really helps everything go click, click, click. And you know what? I really hope that Meghan and Harry, by the way, Harry, honey, I wanted her name first on the title of the documentary. I was a little peeved. It is Harry and Meghan. But I
get it.
Listen to this. I don't get it. But I'm like, ladies first will have a way. What?
Well, see, but it's not, because when you're talking about married people, you name the man first. But if you're talking about a prince, you definitely name him first.
Okay, well, at that married thing, I thought that went away with.
The only time it reverses is the queen, because she is the queen, and so Philip did have to follow her in name, so it'd be the queen and Prince Philip.
I didn't even know she had a husband. Anyway, I was like, who that? Who that little mousy man?
Oh man, he's got a story. He's got a story. Oh yeah.
I was like, she got a husband. She's 150. Anyway, yeah. But anyway, so I want to really acknowledge and honor and thank you, ma'am, for the mixed Brit correspondence. Because again, whatever we do know about our various cultures and ancestral lines and lineages and cultures that we happen to be brought in, whether or not they're reflected in our DNA or not, that's how we learn. Yeah. That's how we're all better able to understand the world, whether it's pop culture or what we're navigating at home, at work, at school, wherever, just in the universe. So you have gifted me, Sir Auntie May, with this, and I believe our listeners, but I really hope Meghan and Harry, I'm putting your names in that order, Meghan and Harry, listen to this episode. I really hope y'all listen to this episode and then hit us up, because we'd love to have you on the chat.
Oh yeah, I definitely would have both of them. He'd be the first monoracial person that would end up on this show, but to talk about I wouldn't pass that up for nothing. Yeah. Also, yeah. Don't forget to follow Militantly Mixed on all the socials at Militantly Mixed, or go to the militantlymixed.com website. You can get your t-shirt and your merches and all that other kind of stuff there. Why don't you tell everybody how to find the Mixed Auntie Confidential?
MixedAuntieConfidential.com, or I'm on Instagram at Teresa Talks, all one word, TARESSA Talks. And you will be hearing from us again very soon. So I was going to say God Save the Queen, but that's probably in death.
Now it would be the king, but
sorry, the king. I'm sorry.
Which I still can't, it's
me either. You said
so
it. I was
weird.
Like, oh, is he? Okay,
it's
yeah.
So
yes,
weird.
He is. He's okay. Never mind. Are we recording? So Meghan, Harry, hit us up.
Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Sharmane Fury. Music is by David Bogan the One. You can follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Militantly Mixed. If you'd like to become a sponsor of Militantly Mixed, please go to patreon.com/militantlymixed for monthly sponsorship, or paypal.me/militantlymixed for a one-time only donation. And if you like what you hear on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to be your mixed-ass self. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.